Welcome back! First of all, we reached 50K. And to celebrate, I'm gonna cut my hair. So I came up with the obvious idea to make Pixar Critiques a monthly show. And I'm gonna make it its own playlist on the channel. On today's episode, we're gonna have Dan, Kian, and Alessio. I don't know. So Dan sent me a few pieces, but the one that I really want to work on is this bird right here because it's pretty darn good, but I think I can show you a few little things to make it even better. So first of all, I noticed that this leg here is red, but this other one isn't. I would make both legs the same color. Alright, so I think that since we're using a dark outline here, the legs should be an even darker color. So I'm going to try making this the center the color that you had, but I'm going to go all the way black with the feet. I'm looking at the top to see how that looks, and it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Look at if I did the foot like that. But personally, since this is like under the belly, it's going to be darker. Know what I'm saying? I'm going to go to black, go to about 50%, and for this I probably will make a new layer. And I'm going to just, a cool thing that you can do for shadows is you can go ahead and you can use the ellipse tool, and I can draw an ellipse here. So in sprite, to move a layer, you go to the edge and then you can drag. So now I put the shadow underneath the bird. So the cool thing about having the shadow on a separate layer is you can double click it, and then here you can change the opacity. So I can, without redrawing, I can sort of pick the shadow that I want. Alright, so that was pretty obvious, right? Now let's get to the harder stuff. So I think for the head, you can see that there's a shading near the top. I don't really like that. I get that you're trying to make it round, but the light is coming from over here and from above. So I would prefer to put the shading underneath. Since we're going to put the shading underneath, an example of that would be right here. This should probably have some kind of shading, and I would add some of that red here as well. Even right next to the wing, because the wing might have a little bit of a shadow on the body. So I just went ahead and added a little bit of shading to that. I'm gonna make the belly a little bit smoother here. Another way that you can do feathers is you can kind of draw these little, I would put one higher. You can draw these little dashes, and these dashes are great for fur or for any sort of feather texture. Even a couple of dots sometimes, if the piece of artwork is small enough, just a couple of dots, like maybe one here, here, and here, is enough to sort of give it a bit of a texture. I know that the beak probably for this bird, it wasn't yellow, but I'm gonna make it yellow just because I think it's gonna look better. And I think I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, and whether it points up or down, I think it looks better if it points down. So I'm gonna change that about the artwork. So to emphasize the roundness and the light source, I'm going to add a highlight to the head. This is something I didn't used to do, but I started to do. And with that highlight, sometimes you can go even brighter in a portion of it.
That's pretty cool.
So that highlight might not be necessary, but I hope you guys see that it makes the head look a lot rounder, and it makes it look like there's light coming from above. I want to show you this technique in Dwarf Sprites. I'm one of the developers working on Dwarf. It's a tower defense dungeon crawler RPG. You can wish it sit on Steam now, and I'd really appreciate that. So here I have a monster sprite sheet for some of the dwarf enemies, and I want to show you how we use this highlight technique in some of the enemies. If you look at the heads here, notice, I'm going to use yellow, but notice that there's a glare here, there's a glare here, there's a glare here. So there's like a pixel that shows a little glare, and then notice this entire area here is a highlight. You see that on the head? This whole area here is a highlight. And the same with this guy right here. Over here on the Necromancer, you see how there's a highlight here and here? So at the top on the head of your NPCs, enemies, or whatever, add a highlight and it will really make them look round. Look at this. You see this around here? So I use that technique to make this guy look rounder, and let's compare the two. Before and after. And I think you'll agree, his head looks a lot rounder. Alright, let's check out Kian's Knight. Okay, so I like that you added all these glares, but you went a little overboard. I think that obviously we want it to be near the top, and one on the side isn't so bad either. I like that you're using that technique that I was showing in a previous video where you do a dot and then a line. It really does make it look like it has somewhat of a shimmer. This right here is pretty good. The back of this shield, I don't know why you did two different colors for the shading of it. That's kind of peculiar, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill that. I need to turn contiguous on, so that way it only fills this color. A cool thing in Sprite is that if you have contiguous turned off, it'll change that color everywhere in the composition. So for example, this right here, all the reds changed, even up here, even though it doesn't touch. But if I turn contiguous on, it won't. This program is called Sprite, and if you want to download it, I have a link in the description. Please use that. I get a tiny little kickback. I'm not sponsored by them. So I think that's something you really need to do, is separate these armor pieces. It also looks like you're missing outline in some areas. There's obviously these little tweaks that I can do, but for example, the chest plate and the leg plates, like, you really should have a separation here somehow. I see that you tried to do it with this dark color, and honestly, I like using dark colors on the inside and keeping just the very outside black or a very, very dark color. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this dark color that you have here to separate the pieces. The shoulder would be a separate piece, so what I would do is, you know, just create an outline for where that would be. This right here looks too messy. I'll try to do what you did. So basically you have some abs, right? And honestly, armor wouldn't really have abs, but let's just say that you did want to have armor on your abs. The abs itself wouldn't have shading, and it actually will mess with the form. So if you have a color that you're using for shading, like this one right here, it's not good to just throw it around like this, because it'll confuse the person. You don't want to use like a dark color like this, for example, to separate the abs. It's too dark. You have to use this only on the edges. So for this middle part, I'm not going to use a dark color. I'm just going to use this standard base color. And remember that this centerpiece is round, so I wouldn't put highlights on the edges like this. If I'm going to put highlights on this, the highlights are either going to be closer to the center like here, or I would put the highlights near the top. So for example, somewhere like this, almost as if we were drawing bricks. I think this is extremely shiny, so I would probably try to tone it down. I don't think you should go all the way white. All the way white, reserve that for like a sword or a tooth, something that's extremely sharp. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where you can explore your creativity. You can find classes for all sorts of creative things, and then you can just watch them at your own pace. There's a community on Skillshare where you can review, discuss, and even look at other people's projects, so you can give them feedback and get feedback on yours. I checked to see if Skillshare had pixel art tutorials, and yep, they sure do. They even have Sprite tutorials, which is the program that I'm using. These tutorials are going to go a little bit more in depth than I am, and honestly, for the price, it's a great deal. Skillshare is just $10 a month. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. In regards to the head, I'm not sure why you have a highlight here. There would be a shadow under the head, so I would actually make it darker. I see that you want to have the red of the cloak around the neck here, but it's too thick. It almost looks like a scarf. I would actually make that a little bit smaller, but I don't think we need to have the outline for it there. And if there is a helmet, it would actually go over the that part, and a helmet probably protrudes. So remember, when things protrude, go ahead and give them an outline. I would give this an outline because the chin is going to actually be sticking out on this guy. The head looks a little bit too round to me. I'm going to make it more of like a bucket kind of head. I honestly prefer those kind of heads. Okay, so there's our big bucket head looking knight. I wouldn't have multiple glares because that really makes it look, in a helmet like this, because that really makes it look like it has different kinds of angles. It makes it harder to see the angles. If you're gonna put a glare on a helmet, just put it in one spot, like at the top here, something like that. But don't have just these like random glares in different areas, because it'll make it hard to tell what the form is. It shouldn't just be sparkling everywhere. It's more of a round head. It's not a perfect like cube. So since it's a little bit round, I put the glare more on the forehead than at the tippy top. So I noticed that you're using an outline here, and the problem is that you're not consistent. You should add that outline on your shield as well. So you see how the outline on the shield makes it look a lot more cohesive? I don't think you need to add an outline on the sword because you're trying to emphasize that it's sharp, so I would leave it white like that. But you could add an outline to the sword. I also see that you have doubles here. To show you what the doubles are is right here you have double pixels. These are unnecessary. If you wanted to blend this, I would really find a color that's somewhere in between, like this. That smooths stuff out. So if you're ever trying to smooth and you notice that you're doing doubles like this, that's when you should use an in-between color. There's a lot more work that could go into this, but I think we should move on to the next one. So Alessio drew this beautiful temple and asked me to critique it. There's almost nothing I could critique here, but I will try. This one's great, and I love the techniques that are used. They're techniques that I love as well. So for example, I want to point out a few of these things. Notice that there's no black line here. A white one was used because that really adds a highlight to the edge. You can see this in my furniture video and a ton of other videos. So something that I did notice that I would probably change is that this piece right here above the door, since it's connecting to the building, I would remove this black line right here. Now it looks more like it's protruding out instead of kind of like it's in front of it. And you can notice this with this technique. The guy did this technique up here. You can notice that there's a black line here, but there's no black line at the top. And that's because this is part of that. So really, you really want to use black to differentiate objects from one another. Since these are Game Boy colors, if you wanted to do a shadow, a way that you could do a shadow is that you could stipple. You could do a little bit of this. So I usually don't stipple, but for Game Boy colors, or when you really want to have a limited color palette, it's a great way to add shadows. So now if I zoom out, you can see it looks a little bit more like that building has a bit of a shadow there near the edge. And then if you were in a dungeon or something like that, I like to make the shadow a little bit messy, a little bit less uniform, and then it looks like there's a little bit of dirt or a little bit of debris right around the edges. Notice also that there's no black outline on the bottom of these objects or these walls. I'm emphasizing this because I love it. I love to do that, and you can see here how that adds to the art. Don't forget to follow and message me on Twitter so you can be in the next critique episode. Also, if you mention me, there's a chance that I'm gonna retweet your artwork. If you want free pixel art assets for your game, there's a link in the description to my itch where you can download a free sprite pack. And please press that follow button so you're notified when I update the sprite pack and add other stuff. Just a reminder, on my clothing line panicpop.com, I have free shirts and some sizes are running out. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.